بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. I'd like to welcome you to this session of dyspnea. The purpose of this talk is to get you to recognize dyspnea as an important topic, a symptom, a sign, and what to do when you're taking history and physical and dealing with this patient in the emergency department, and also realize that dyspnea can sometimes be life-threatening. Well, let's advance the slides. You probably are looking at that slide right now. I'd like to start by the definition of dyspnea. Everything should start with a definition. So what is dyspnea? Someone's going to say dyspnea is difficulty in breathing. That might be true. And someone would say not being able to breathe comfortably, and that would also be true. But I would say just being aware of the act of breathing is called dyspnea. Being aware that your heart is beating is called palpitations. And being aware that your intestines are moving is colic. Some things are not supposed to be felt when they function in your body. Breathing should also happen naturally. You should not be aware of your breathing. The minute you are aware of your breathing is either because your work of breathing is hard or elevated, or because you're breathing too fast, or because you're having a problem completing your breathing cycle. And when that happens, you become aware of something that was happening naturally without paying attention to it. So dyspnea is simply being aware of your act of breathing. Let's advance the slide. Epidemiology, just to tell you that this is a common problem. A lot of patients visit emergency departments, at least in the US, for that problem. The common problems we see in the emergency department is going to be either heart or lung. And I'm giving you 5 common diagnoses that drives people to the emergency department with dyspnea. 4 of them are related to the lungs, and 1 is related to the heart. The classic thing is congestive heart failure, obviously. But when you look at the lungs, there could be an infection like pneumonia, it could be airway problems like COPD, it could be a vascular problem like pulmonary embolism, and another very common airway problem, which is very prevalent in our society, by the way, is asthma. Let's talk about the pathophysiology. My belief is if you understand physiology, and then what happens to turn physiology into pathology, which is called pathophysiology, you'll be able to figure out what happens to the patient. You'll be able to figure out the clinical picture. You'll no longer have to memorize symptoms and signs and treatments and stuff like that. If you just understand physiology, when it turns into pathology, your job as a doctor is to recognize the pathology and turn it back into physiology. So pathophysiology is everything in medicine. That's why I like to say, what really happens at the brain level that makes us aware of the act of breathing? What is happening in our organs? And I would say that we perceive that sense of dyspnea in the cerebral cortex, in the area that is called the sensory center. So, our sensory cortex is receiving information telling us that we have a problem in the breathing process. And that could be coming from lots of places in the respiratory cycle and in the organs utilized to complete that cycle. Now, we are all aware of all these peripheral receptors that sense inefficiency of the respiratory process. Hypoxemia, hypercapnia, acidosis. We have receptors like in the carotid body, chemoreceptors, and that would sense any of these changes and tell the respiratory center in the brain stem, hey, I need you to work extra hard. I need more oxygen. I need you to blow off the carbon dioxide. I'm having acidosis. I need to compensate for metabolic acidosis. So these are the stimulants. Also, if you're having trouble with overstretch of your muscles and chest, all these receptors will send impulses to the respiratory center. And at the same time, they are also sending signals up to the sensory cortex, telling the cortex something is going on. We are working over hard. And when your muscles have to work hard to overcome a resistance, like an obstruction in asthma or COPD, or to open up a stiff lung or pleura in fibrotic diseases or pulmonary congestion or CHF, now, the motor area is telling the sensory area also, hey, my guys are telling me that we are overworking for this process of breathing. So everything goes into the sensory cortex, and just being aware that you have to work hard, doing something extra to complete that breathing cycle is what is called dyspnea. I hope you have a good understanding now what dyspnea is. Now, the rest is easy if you understand pathophysiology. Now, here's a challenge. In the emergency department, you have the challenge of dealing with a potentially life-threatening problem like dyspnea that could actually kill people. You have to make a diagnosis very quickly. And you have to discern between a wide variety of differential diagnostic etiologies. And you have to act fast and manage the problem. As you diagnose and take the history, one hand is probably obtaining history and the other hand is already doing management. And that's the challenge in the management of dyspnea or respiratory problems. This is a slide that I would love to demonstrate for you what the respiratory process really is. A respiratory process is not just the respiratory system working to get air in our lungs. No, it is actually giving oxygen all the way to the mitochondria. That's where you have oxygenation of your food. That's when Krebs cycle takes place. That's when you break down and burn your glucose into the pyruvate cycle to generate ATP. So let's follow the process from the top. You have oxygen in the air, it has to travel into the alveoli, and from the alveoli it has to exchange with the blood, and in the blood you have a cardiovascular system that needs to pump it out to all the periphery, and over there you have tissue that has to be healthy and active to be able to uptake this oxygen into the cells. Obviously, hemoglobin is carrying oxygen in the blood. Once you reach the cells, the tissue, you have to get that oxygen inside the cells to get it to the mitochondria so you can start your metabolism. If that does not happen for any of many reasons, then there is not enough oxygen in the mitochondria. You cannot do the pyruvate cycle or the Krebs cycle. You're going to turn into a bacteria. Your body is going to act like a bacteria because there is not enough oxygen. You're going to be anaerobic without oxygen. So anaerobic metabolism generates a small amount of ATP, only like 2 molecules, and at the same time produces lots of lactate. And that is a problem because lactate is not good. It's acid. So when you are having problem breathing or you're having hypoxemia, low oxygen tension in the blood, or when you have hypoxia, means low oxygen tension in the tissue, and you have lots of lactate, and your body is turning into a bacteria, producing lots of lactic acid from glycolysis, then the problem could be in the respiratory system, or the cardiovascular system, or the blood transport system, or at the tissue level.